Hello and welcome back to Off the Post. In today's episode, we'll be discussing what's next for Newcastle after Eddie Howe has left the club. But before that, as always, please like, comment, and subscribe. It's very much appreciated, and it goes along with me build a small community on my channel. We've recently just hit 340 subscribers. Well on my way to getting my main target, 500. Can we go and smash it? Hopefully we can. I just want to say a massive thank you for the recent support on our most recent episodes, all the likes and the comments on social media as well. Definitely is going noticed. And I just want to say a massive thank you for the overall support, really. But let's get straight into the episode, shall we? Now, Eddie Howe has left Newcastle United with immediate effect, and for me, I'm a little bit unsure about the timing of this dealing, okay? Just because, why would he leave halfway through pre-season or the start of pre-season? They've probably played 2 or 3 games, haven't they, Newcastle at this point? And for me, if Eddie Howe was always going to potentially leave the club, which it's looking like this way, especially having a disappointing season last season, why wouldn't he leave, just after the World Cup or just before pre-season started? Because now they've got to get a new manager in, which probably take a week or two if you like, and then obviously that new manager's got to get used to the players at his disposal and whatnot to sort of assess his squad and to assess what players he needs to bring in, having already probably played 3 or 4 games probably at that point. So you got to think to yourself, Eddie Howe with this dealing, he's probably not left Newcastle on the best note, especially having a disappointing season last season, finishing 12th in the Premier League was absolutely abysmal, especially when they're, competing for European competitions, competing in the Champions League, competing in Europe as well. For me, Eddie Howe's time at Newcastle, the 5 years, has been actually pretty impressive, just because obviously they spent 2 seasons in the Champions League, they won a Carabao Cup, a trophy for the first time in 70 years. So from that point of view, Eddie Howe has done a great job. However, in the last season or two, it has been going on a downward spiral, if you like, just because in terms of having, not getting their main targets in the transfer window, having to get their, B targets, C targets, maybe even D targets, if you like, and then obviously finishing 12th in the Premier League last season when you're meant to be competing for those, top 6 positions with the likes of Aston Villa, with the likes of, Sunderland doing it, with Brighton doing it. You got to compete with those teams to sort of be in that position to potentially, finish in the Champions League once again. And against the miss out, they're going to have like a little bit less money to spend because of their PSR problems and whatnot. We can go into that, but I don't really want to go into all that detail just because for me it's important, but I don't know really the ins and outs properly. But there is a lot of finances which do hold obviously the likes of Aston Villa and Newcastle back compared to the big teams who earn more revenue from kit sponsors, from television deals and all this sort of stuff. So from that point of view, it's always a tricky one when you talk about not getting the signings over the line, just because obviously if you're missing out on the likes of Margehi, Hugo Ekitike, all these other big names, Manzabi this season of course went to Aston Villa, but again if you've got the choice between if Margehi's got the choice between joining Newcastle or waiting another 6 months and joining Man City, he's always going to join Man City. If Hugo Ekitike has got the choice to, obviously try and sign for Liverpool or Newcastle, you're always going to choose Liverpool because they're competing for those top positions, aren't they, in the league? Again, another name, James Trafford, that comes to mind. He was very heavily rumoured to join Newcastle last season, wasn't he? Just before he joined Man City. So you got to think to yourself, why aren't they getting these signings over the line? Is it because nobody wants to join Newcastle? Nobody sees it as a important project. Nobody. Don't get me wrong. They've got a lot of money to throw about, haven't they, the owners? But it's actually getting the players through the door. And when you're signing the players, the likes of Nick Walter-Marder, Jacob Ramsey, Anthony Elanga, when you sign Wizard as well. For me, all 4 of those signings last season didn't work at all. Okay, all 4 of those main players absolutely flopped. Don't get me wrong, Nick Walter-Marder had a first pretty decent 5 or 6 games, but again, his form dropped off. Jacob Ramsey was never going to be a starter in that midfield when you've got Sandro Tonali, Bruno Guimaraes, when you've got all these other players in the midfield. He's not going to get in front of those guys. So he did okay in 1 or 2 Champions League games. I remember but again, he didn't really do anything else. Did Jacob Ramsey, Johan Wissa? I'm pretty sure he was injured for half of the first season, for the first half of the season, wasn't he? And in the second half, he was always playing second fiddle to is it Osula, the Brazilian striker, who he actually is pretty decent, to be fair. But again, you got to think to yourself, it was just going from bad to worse for Newcastle. The downhill spiral last season, you could really start to see it was like becoming a negative place under Eddie Howe. The fans, the players just weren't getting behind him, and you could really tell that it was going to go quite bad for him. Finishing 12th, not even in top half, not top half of the table, is so lackluster, so disappointing from the players they've got at their disposal, because the players are, we've seen it, they're way better than that, aren't they? Finishing 12th, they're way better. When you've got the likes of Sunderland finishing above your rivals, finishing below your rivals, sorry, in Sunderland, they got like what, 7th or 8th, got into the Conference League, absolutely fantastic for them. The Conference League or Europa League, I can't remember now, but they did get into, I think it was Europa League actually, didn't they, Sunderland? So you got to think to yourself, Newcastle finishing below them was an absolute travesty, just because, you know, obviously it's their first season back in the Premier League, they spent a lot of money, but at the same time, you've always, if you're Newcastle, the pride of Newcastle being the Geordie, the main thing you'd want is to always finish above your main rivals, and it's Sunderland. And I'm pretty sure did they lose some or draw to them? They didn't get a good record last season against Sunderland, did they? I think they might have lost one, drew one, I'm pretty sure. Let me know in the comments down below if I'm right or wrong. But when we talk about managers that's going to come in and replace Eddie Howe, the most rumored name is Matthias Yesel, a manager in the Saudi Pro League. For me, I've never ever heard of this guy. I might be wrong. He might be, he might come in and absolutely smash it straight away for Newcastle. But again, I don't know anything about Matthias ESL. So from that point of view, maybe educate me in the comments down below, Newcastle fans. How would you feel about Matthias ESL? Would you reckon he'll come in and do something decent? Will he have a better record than Eddie Howe? But talking about Eddie Howe's record, okay, he's the second. He's got the second best win ratio out of any Newcastle manager, behind Kevin Keegan. Okay, I think Kevin Keegan's got like 51% and Eddie Howe's got 46%. So from that point of view, managing 231 games for Eddie Howe at Newcastle throughout his 5 years, I still put it overall as a success. What's going to happen to him now, Eddie Howe? From that point of view, I'm not too sure. Will he move on to join a better club? I can't really see that in the short term. For me, I feel like he probably will have to go back down a level or two, just because for me, he's not left on the best note, has he? It's not really gone his way this season. But again, he's got a good reputation, so maybe he could get a good job if. Like it, let's say if somebody gets sacked, maybe he could be the next England manager. I don't know. Let's say if it doesn't work out for Thomas Tuchel, could he come in for England? He's been touted for many years to be the next England manager. So maybe that's the case for Eddie Howe. I can't really see it. I don't really know what other Premier League clubs he could go to. I couldn't see him at a Big Six club. I couldn't really see him, managing like the likes, maybe like a Nottingham Forest, maybe like someone like that, maybe like a big team that's sort of fighting in those little areas at the moment, in the bottom half of the table now. But I don't know. But again, he's a very good manager, Eddie Howe. For me, like I just said, Matthias Yesel, I don't have a clue who he is. I don't even want to say anything about him, just because if it does happen, if it doesn't happen, it's a risk either way, isn't it? For me, a manager coming from the Saudi Pro League, he's a massive, upgrade in terms of the players. So it's going to be even harder. It's going to be a harder step for him to manage the players in the Premier League, to set up the team in the Premier League to go out and win these games. Let me know in the comments down below what you think. But before that, as always, please like, comment, and subscribe. It's very much appreciated. It goes a lot of me build a small community on my channel. We've recently just hit 340 subscribers, well on my way to getting my main target, 500. Can we go and smash it? Just want to say a massive thank you for the recent support on our most recent episodes, all the likes and the comments on social media as well, and I really do hope you guys have a good rest of your day, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace out.